Welcome to our monthly Tango Alpha Lima Be the One podcast. I'm your host, Amy Forsyth, and I'll be here on the first of each month with guests who provide expertise, resources, and peer-to-peer support as part of the American Legion Be the One initiative to prevent suicide within the veteran community. On the first day of every month, American Legion family members are encouraged to wear Be the One apparel to publicly show their commitment to reducing the stigma around mental health issues. During this episode, we discuss topics that may be troubling for some. If you or a veteran you know is in crisis, call the Veterans Crisis Line at 988 and press 1. Go to d.a.r.e to learn how you can be the one to save one veteran. Let's get today's conversation started. Today, our guest is Juliana Mercer, a Marine Corps veteran and the Veteran Advocacy and Public Policy Director of Healing Breakthrough, a nonprofit organization with a mission to sponsor and promote research, training, and political advocacy to drive system-wide adoption of MDMA-Assisted Therapy in the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Juliana, welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima Be the One podcast. It's so great to join you today and learn more about all your great work. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amy. It's great to be here with you.
Yes, we crossed paths last year. And when I saw your name on the list, I was so excited because we do have a lot of topics to talk about, but we also crossed paths during our service together in the Marine Corps in Iraq in 2006. And you've had such an amazing, inspiring career and journey during your Marine Corps career and then beyond, and your passion that fuels your work today. And so we're just so grateful to have you here on this podcast. But let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about your service and how you ended up joining the Marine Corps.
Oh gosh, there's a short story. I had absolutely no intention of joining the military. My senior year in high school, in 2000, I had a track scholarship. I was going to go to college, and I was a very curious kid and just happened to be in a strip mall where the recruiters were all in a row. And I just wanted to ask questions. And I had no intent of joining the military, no desire, but I was curious and I wanted to learn more. And I was bored and just happened to be by the recruiters. So I went in and talked to every office, and everything that they shared with me sounded interesting and it was good to learn, but none of it piqued my interest. The very last office was the Marine Corps office. There was dress blues in the window, and I realized I didn't know what a Marine was. So I was like, okay, well, I might as well go into this office as well. And when the recruiter explained to me what a Marine was, everything that he said resonated with me, and it was everything that I wanted to be. And that day I decided to sign the dotted line and enlist in the Marine Corps.
Wow, fantastic. Where did you grow up and where did you enlist from?
So I'm from San Diego, but I happen to have moved to Arizona, enlisted out of Sierra Vista near Fort Huachuca, actually.
Great. And then you found yourself a couple years in and the heat of everything at the height of the insurgency in Anbar province, working as a Marine in civil affairs in Fallujah. Tell us a little bit about your experience in that deployment.
Yeah, that deployment was, it was my first deployment, and was able to see, I think, a side of the Marine Corps, but also of what we were doing out in the combat theater that most Marines and most service members don't get to see. And that was the Hearts and Minds campaign, where we were engaging with the local population and trying to figure out ways to help support them through the combat that was happening in their communities, and really getting to see what the people there were experiencing, and also getting to see that we weren't just there for combat operations. We were there to also take care of the local population.
And during that year in 2006 in Anbar province, in Fallujah, Ramadi, Al-Qaim, places that people have heard about. They call it some of the toughest dirt in Iraq. It was very dangerous. losing service members with severe injuries or being killed. Definitely a difficult time. And as a young person, what did you take from that going forward in your career, and how that fueled your passion for the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so after that deployment, I was able to return home and started working with the Marine for Life Injured Support Program. That was before we had a Wounded Warrior Battalion that was stood up. So I actually had a BlackBerry and a laptop, and I was running around Camp Pendleton finding our wounded warriors and checking in on them. And because for the lack of a formal program, I was figuring out what types of services were out there to connect them to, what they were going through and experiencing. And these were the early days where I don't think we had quite figured out, how people's personalities change with brain injuries and how they change with PTSD. So really starting to see those things and using the information that I was gathering to report back to say, hey, these are things that we should be looking at. The next year, the Wounded Warrior Battalion was stood up, and I went to San Diego Naval Hospital in Balboa and joined the Wounded Warrior Detachment there, where I spent about 3 years receiving our wounded Marines that were coming back from theater and doing everything holistic, so non-medical, to take care of them and help them to figure out how to live their lives post-injury. I had a deployment after that to Afghanistan, to Helmand, 2010 to 11. But the work that I did at the Wounded Warrior Battalion really helped me to find something that I was passionate about, but also easily transition into the veteran nonprofit space post active duty. So when I returned from Afghanistan, I started working for veteran nonprofits. And my intent was to help veterans thrive post-military so that they wouldn't fall into what I called the black hole, a place where they were lacking purpose and where they were more prone to feeling alone and to ending up a statistic, essentially.
Well, it's just an amazing roller coaster. I'm going to say an emotional roller coaster for you with the deployments, and then coming back and not being a member of the medical community. What was your original training in the Marine Corps? What was your MOS?
So I originally trained in logistics and then trained in civil affairs. When I was at the Wounded Warrior Battalion, it was definitely training by learning by through drinking through a fire hose, but also just really learning how to be creative and figuring out solutions to problems that we hadn't encountered before.
And you mentioned the Wounded Warrior Battalion. I remember those days at Camp Pendleton. These Marines and sailors were coming back injured, and it really was a model for the rest of the DoD to follow, and really created this momentum in understanding the difference between a combat injury and then how to treat it, how to separate that from the operating forces with a continuous cycle of deployments. They could not remain in the battalion or in the unit and be effective. And so you were at the tip of the spear in creating these programs that are still in place today and have become the model really for the Army and the Navy and the Air Force. And so that really propelled you into that nonprofit space. Can you talk more about how that sort of led to where you are today more? You stayed in the area in San Diego, and your mission and what you're doing and how that connects with the American Legion.
Absolutely. So, trying to figure out ways to help veterans thrive. So we looked at everything from unemployment. When I started that work back in the mid 2000s, the veteran unemployment rate was close to 3 times the civilian unemployment rate. And we thought, okay, veterans are not feeling welcome at home because they can't find employment. They're feeling a lack of purpose. So if we fix that problem, we'll fix the subsequent problem, which is the veteran suicide rate. If you look at the suicide rate of 6,000 a year that has held steady since 2005, that program didn't work. So we took the veteran suicide rate from almost 30% to now below the civilian unemployment rate, but we're still losing the same number of veterans. We did, some of the programs that we stood up, surf therapy, even, puppy therapy, everything and anything that we could throw at the problem, we were throwing at this problem, because we're like, if anything works, we're going to try it. And it became really frustrating work, because that needle was not moving. In fact, it was staying or going in the wrong direction. And so there was a point where, that frustration, along with the pain of continuing to lose brothers and sisters, just became too much. And I found myself in that black hole, and in a place where, while I was doing really purposeful work, I no longer felt like I had purpose. And I knew, because of the work that I had done over the years, that I needed help. And I sought out talk therapy through the Cohen clinics, and was able to find a little bit of relief and not feel so alone, but it wasn't helping me get to the root cause of my issues. And around the same time that I started the talk therapy, I met a nonprofit called Heroic Hearts Project. And their mission is to connect veterans to psychedelic assisted therapy outside of the country where it's not illegal. So these psychedelics are currently illegal in the US, but they're not illegal in other countries. And there's retreats that you can go to access this type of therapy. And so I went and had an experience with psychedelics that helped me to almost overnight access that 20 years of collected trauma and grief. A lot of things that I think, like a lot of veterans do, is we put it away and we say we're going to deal with it later, because we're so focused on the mission at hand that we don't have the time. And eventually, because we've not dealt with anything, we forget how to even deal with things or process things. And I did that for a really long time. And that experience with, for me, it was psilocybin mushrooms, allowed me to feel and experience and grieve and let that pain go through me instead of be stuck inside of me. And I woke up after that experience and was no longer feeling that weight of everything just stuck inside of me, and saw in the mirror a joyful, loving, happy, authentic Juliana. And after that experience, I knew that this was the solution that I'd been looking for my veteran brothers and sisters. I started advocating and, educating myself on this stuff, and also advocating to see how we can get these therapies available to veterans here in the US, because it's a shame that they have to leave the country to access the healing that they deserve. To date, there's a couple of organizations that are helping veterans travel outside of the US. And we've had thousands of veterans now go through and have just really life-changing, life-saving experiences. And so that brings us to my work now with Healing Breakthrough. We're focused on getting MDMA-assisted therapy into the VA so that veterans can access it here at home. MDMA-assisted therapy is a medication in combination with cognitive behavioral therapy that has completed the FDA trial process, is en route to FDA approval. The clinical trials showed that it is 71% effective in eliminating a PTSD diagnosis after 1 to 3 treatments over a 4-month period of time. And those that don't see complete reduction in their PTSD, they have an 86% reduction in symptoms. So they're going from having chronic complex PTSD to only experiencing about 14% of those symptoms, and being able to start actually working towards greater healing. So this treatment is the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of having an actual solution that is scientifically proven, that's going to be medically approved, that's going to start saving veteran lives.
Well, wonderful. People have been hearing words like MDMA, ibogaine, and some other things that have become more mainstream. How's your response been from the VA? You mentioned you're in Washington, D.C. right now as we're talking, and you're active there and trying to talk to people and lobby or communicate these important breakthroughs and studies. What's your response been, and how are they responding, and where do you see this going in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, so I think there's been a combination of pressure from all different angles. Clinicians inside of the VA have been working tirelessly to study MDMA. There's 7 different trials that are currently happening within the VA system. Those have been bottom up led, and they've also been sponsored by philanthropic dollars. So to date, the VA hadn't put any funding towards studying these compounds. A month ago, the VA announced that it's going to, for the first time ever, fund studies into the research of 2 psychedelic compounds. That's MDMA and psilocybin. Both of those compounds were deemed breakthrough therapies by the FDA. And breakthrough therapy designation means it's a substance that shows great promise. And so they will allow it to fast track through the FDA process. MDMA just submitted their new drug application. We should know this week, so middle of February, if they've accepted the drug application, and we anticipate it being FDA approved late this year. Psilocybin has just started their phase 3 clinical trials and is also en route to potential FDA approval in 3 to 5 years. So there's a lot of promising things that are happening. So the VA's announcement of the funding for research, huge. I think late last year, the undersecretary had a podcast. It was the first ever podcast that they were doing, talking about psychedelic therapy inside of the VA. So the conversations are really positive. There's people in clinics. There's also the VA leadership that is really starting to be supportive of this. And I think the fact that we've been educating and we have the science to back up how these compounds work has been really helpful. When I'm here on the Hill in DC, I'm walking into offices of our legislators who have been trying to solve the veteran suicide epidemic for the last 20 years as well. They've been frustrated, just like those of us that have been trying to solve this problem have been, because we haven't had a solution that's moved the needle in the right direction. So when I go into their offices and I tell them there's a science medical-based solution that is not just effective, 2/3 of those that undergo this therapy no longer qualify for a PTSD diagnosis, it's very hard for them to say no. We do run up against some of the stigma around psychedelics, and, people hear psychedelics and they think of hippies in the 60s. And we're able to, because we have the science, we're able to educate them and show them why this isn't the same thing as, the stereotype that they think of. So it's been really positive there. And I think, the tie-in to the American Legion is the same tie-in as our legislators. We have been trying to find solutions, and nothing has moved the needle in the right direction. And it's up to us to get together, to get behind this tip of the spear medication, to educate about the science behind it, the availability, and also to put pressure on the VA to make sure that they roll out a program that enables them to give MDMA therapy to veterans as soon as it's FDA approved. It's going to be a process, and for them to figure out how to roll this out as a program, because it's not a typical therapy. It's therapy with a medication session that happens inside of the clinic, and the medication session lasts 6 to 8 hours. So logistically, a medication session where you have to be in a room inside the VA with a mental health care provider for 6 to 8 hours it's something that they've never scheduled before. They've never set aside a room to do that. And so there's not only logistical things, there's training of the clinicians, there's figuring out how they are going to get the medication into their pharmacies to be able to give it to the clinician to administer to the veteran. So there's lots of things that they need to figure out. And we're saying, figure it out now so that once it's FDA approved, you can hit the ground running and start saving veteran lives.
A few hurdles to cross. But that's what with the Be the One podcast, our goal really is to shout from the rooftops of solutions, ways that people like you and others, we had the Capones on with vets, veterans exploring treatment solutions. They're from San Diego as well, on their breakthrough work that they're doing. So you, the Capones, and many others that are talking about the scientific data and ways to communicate this as an education. First, it's an education strategy and a campaign to the folks who are voting on this and who are allocating the funds. But if we could take us back, and for the listeners out there, take us back to your own experience, if you could, if you want to share with us, really, I mean, the emotional roller coaster of the burden, the emotional burden that you had in dealing with the troops that were suffering so much after coming back from combat, your own experiences of the grief and the loss and the sorrow just compounded over all those years. And when you wanted to find a way, how you went through used a group, and then you traveled out of the country. Tell us about your experience with that, and where did you go, and were you hesitant, or what was your belief? What did you know what to expect when you did this?
Yeah, so back to kind of what got me there. I think like most veterans my age, we grew up in the d.a.r.e generation, just say no to drugs. Never in my wildest dreams that I think that I would be looking at a psychedelic compound for healing. So there was an education piece that had to happen for me to be okay with even considering that. There was a lot of stigma that I personally had to combat. And thankfully, the organization that I connected to, Heroic Hearts Project, is similar to vets who you spoke with. And coincidentally, I was just on a radio show with Marcus Capone this morning, sharing about all of this. So these organizations that are taking veterans outside of the country in very safe, creating very safe ways for them to do it, they are making sure that before they go, they're connected with a coach that helps them to prepare for the psychedelic experience. So you don't just go down there and you take something and, hope that everything is okay. So these coaches help you to set intentions for the purpose that you're going down there, help you to start to dig deep as to what the problems that you're trying to solve are. But they also help you to understand what the psychedelic experience is going to look like. You go, there's veterans are going to Mexico, they're going to Costa Rica, Peru, and they're going to, similar to me, they're going to retreat centers that are vetted. They have people that are professionals in administering, whether it's ayahuasca or ibogaine or psilocybin mushrooms. They're going somewhere where these facilities are equipped to administer these medicines in a therapeutic way. And you have, usually it's a 3 to 4 day, three days to a week long experience, where usually you're going with other veterans. If you're going with one of these organizations, you're going to be going with other veterans, going through the experience kind of collectively, even though the actual medicinal experience is an individual experience. They're usually in group settings. So you're going, with 8 to a dozen other veterans and experiencing this retreat together. Afterwards, once you come home, you then connect with your coach or your therapist. In my case, I had a coach and a therapist at the same time, and you start to work through the experience that you had with the psychedelic. So for me, with the psilocybin, I was able to, one, which I think is really important to mention, I was able to give myself credit for all of the trauma that I had in fact endured. I think I, because of, the loss that I saw, the physical loss that I saw with my wounded warriors, I'd look in the mirror and I'm like, I have all of my limbs. I'm able to physically function. There's nothing wrong with me. And I said that for a very long time and didn't give myself credit for everything that, the personal loss, the experiences in combat, the collected pain from working with our wounded, giving myself the credit for all of those things not being normal and not being okay, and that it was okay that those things had affected me, was the very first step that happened in that experience. And so I gave myself credit for the trauma I endured, and then gave myself permission, and recognized that I'm worthy of healing. And so after that happened, I was able to actually feel and experience, the emotions that I had bottled up and allow them to flow through me. These substances oftentimes, uh, enhance your empathy receptors, and they also, flood you with good good endorphins, so you are feeling more love, more empathy, more care. And a lot of us have to have more love towards ourselves and more empathy towards ourselves in everything that we've experienced. And so when you can look at yourself in an empathetic and loving way and forgive yourself for the things that you've gone through and are able to forgive others, it just opens up so many things that have been locked up. So that was a major part of my experience, is like really being empathetic towards myself and connecting to my self-love. And I think that that's, if you talk to and hear other veteran stories, that you'll hear some similar things.
Well, thank you for sharing that, just to give people an idea about what you went through and how it really, the experience changed, and then the results, and ongoing. So for anyone listening out there, we're going to put some links in, but how can people connect with you if they have questions, or we'd like to share that information if someone's just sort of curious about these psychedelics, so they can do their own research and learn more. It's becoming more mainstream, but really the goal is to find a solution and be a part of the solution for those veterans out there who've tried and haven't found the right way, and who want to take this extra leap and take that next step to get some additional help or some additional information about this.
Yeah, so there's a few ways that you can access this. You can participate in a clinical trial, and I believe the website is trials.gov. You can also connect to one of the nonprofits that's helping veterans connect to these therapies in a safe manner. That's heroicheartproject.org and veteransexploringtreatmentsolutions.org. There's tons of information out there. Both of these organizations have good information on their website. They also have a peer network that you can connect to. And you can get more information about Healing Breakthrough at healingbreakthrough.org.
Right. And now here at the Be the One podcast, and with the American Legions, dedicated and committed to preventing and reducing veteran suicide. Just this past month and the past few months, we've had more veteran suicides, and it's heartbreaking every time we see it. It's just more out there, and as you're scrolling on social media and we see these tragic cases, and it just doesn't have to be that way. And so we talk about ways to combat and reduce veteran suicide. This is just one of them, but it really is promising. And so going forward, um, if people aren't ready to take that step, what are some other ways that you think that there's so many resources on the American Legion website, and they're like the leading organization for our veterans, but there might be some that we don't know about. Can you share of how someone can be the one, or something else that you can refer people to?
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that there isn't one size fits all solution. That there's so many different things out there, that one thing may work for someone and it may not work for another. So really being open, being curious, and talking to each other. I know in the Marine Corps, we call it the Lance Corporal Underground. And that's where you're going to get information from veteran brothers and sisters on tried and true, and potentially keep you from going down the wrong path as well. So just talking to each other, I think, is the best thing that we can do, and share what has and what hasn't worked, and learn from each other's experiences. There's a lot of different newer, not they're newer therapies, but they're not newer. Um, Part of the experience with these different substances is also things like yoga and meditation, and getting together with community, and having peer support. So I think the American Legion is doing a really great job of starting to make that call to action, to be the one to reach out to your veteran brothers and sisters, to not just wait for someone to call you. That community piece is so important. And I've seen that, from while I was in, but then, the time that I've been out, that community has been what has kept me going, and what, when I was alone, was able to step up to the plate and say, "Hey, we have a solution, come this way." So that's my tips on being the one.
Wonderful. This new generation of the newest generation of veterans, maybe they're 22, 23, and they served 4 years. They're getting out now. They do seem a little bit more open to mental health wellness. And the more we talk about it, the better it is. And maybe when you and I were, on active duty and serving, it was very much, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but it definitely wasn't discussed. And all those very difficult times, people are getting killed. They don't and injured. It was very, very sad. And but yet to have to keep going and do the work and deploy again, and manage that sort of emotional roller coaster. Maybe someone it is taking 15 years, 20 years to realize how stressful that was, and what your body was going through, what your body, your heart, and your mind were going through at the time. So it doesn't matter what era of veteran that you are today, mental health wellness is wellness all around. And I'm sure that that's part of your priorities as well.
Absolutely. And also recognizing that it doesn't matter whether you served 4 or 20, whether you deployed or you were here at home, that there's so many different things that can cause pain and trauma. And people are dealing with different types of trauma every day. And so not comparing yourself to the combat Marine that was, in 6, 7, 8 different deployments, and saying, well, I'm fine because I didn't have to do what they did, I think is another thing that I want to highlight. We all have different experiences, and we all experience trauma in different ways, and seeking help and talking about it is not, it shouldn't be reserved for those that experience what we perceive to be like really bad, great trauma.
Well, Juliana, it has really been a pleasure speaking with you today. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with folks? And where would you send someone who just wants to do a little bit of cursory info finding? Where would you send them first?
Yeah, I would send them to the Heroic Hearts Project website and the Vets website. They both have really great information on there. And I know Heroic Hearts Project can connect you to peer support, and can connect you to veterans who have gone through the experience, and that can talk to you about the experience and answer any of your questions.
Okay, well, wonderful. Our today's guest was Juliana Mercer. She's a Marine Corps veteran and Veteran Advocacy and Public Policy Director of Healing Breakthrough, a nonprofit organization with a mission to sponsor and promote research, training, and political advocacy to drive system-wide adoption of MDMA-assisted therapy in the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. It has been absolutely my pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for all the work that you are doing and that you have done and that you will do in the future. We'll be checking in with you. We want to hear some updates, and when you're back in San Diego, we can connect and talk more about the progress that you're making. So thank
Yes.
you so much.
Thank you so much, Amy, and Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. Thank you so much. And thank you, Alphas, for tuning in to the Tango Alpha Lima Be the One podcast. Remember, you can be the one to save one veteran. Find resources and more information at be-the-one.org and connect with the American Legion on social media to keep the conversation going. Don't forget to subscribe to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. And please share a podcast with others, subscribe, like, and follow. And we'll see you on the first of every month. On the first day of every month, American Legion family members are encouraged to wear Be the One apparel to publicly show their commitment to reducing the stigma around mental health issues. Go to be-the-one.org to learn how you can be the one to save one veteran. If you're a veteran in crisis or concerned about one, call the Veterans Crisis Line at 988 and press 1. You're not alone. The Veterans Crisis Line is here for you, and you don't have to be enrolled in the VA. Help is available, and speak with someone today.